So for this video, I'm going to be discussing all of the books that I reread in the year 2021. And a lot of people, at the end of the year for BookTube, they like to make their biggest surprises of the year, and that's either books that they really loved that they didn't expect to love, or books that they were really disappointed by that they thought that were going to be great. But for me, my biggest surprise of the year, honestly, is just the sheer amount of books that I have reread, because normally I'm not a big rereader. Like, I just want to read as many new books to me as possible. So for me to read all of these books, reread all of these books when I have so many books that I already want to read in the first place, that's probably my biggest surprise of the year. All right, but enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so I don't have these books in any kind of particular order, but you will notice a theme that a lot of these books that I reread this year have been fantasy books, and that's mainly because I wanted to catch up on the series, or there was a new book coming out this year that I wanted to, read. So let's go ahead and start with probably my second favorite fantasy series of all time, Stormlight Archive. So last December, I actually reread Way of Kings, which is my second favorite book of all time, and I wanted to reread Stormlight Archive because Rhythm of War was coming out, and I had planned on, doing it like all right before Rhythm of War came out, but that didn't happen. So I ended up rereading both Words of Radiance and Oathbringer at the beginning of the year, so I could, of course, read Rhythm of War at the beginning of the year. And of course, these two books, along with most of the books that I have here, were, of course, 5 stars. And yeah, 5 stars, not too much else to say about it. I also reread Poppy War, which is the Poppy War in the Dragon Republic, because I wanted to catch up and read The Burning God, which I gave 5 stars, and I gave both of these books 5 stars. So you might notice a theme here. Another fantasy book that I absolutely loved that I reread was City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. And I wanted to reread this because it's the first book in the Divine Cities trilogy. And even though I read this a few years ago, I never finished the trilogy. And, if I don't know about y'all, but I have real bad book amnesia. So if I read a book, probably in a couple years, I'm probably going to forget most of it. So I reread this, and then I read City of Blades and City of Miracles, which I did enjoy, but I gave both of them 4 stars, whereas I gave this one 5 stars. And this is still an all-time favorite fantasy book for me. Along those same lines, one of my all-time favorite fantasy series is the Song of Shattered Sand series. And again, years ago, I read 12 Kings in Cherokee, Book 1, and With Blood Upon the Sand, Book 2. And I absolutely loved them the first time I read them. But again, book amnesia. I had forgotten not most of it, but a lot of it. And so I quickly reread Book 1 and Book 2, I think this summer, and I gave both of them 5 stars. And then I'm kind of catching up on the series. I've since read Book 3 and Book 4, Veil of Spears and Beneath the Twisted Trees. And I didn't love them quite as much as the first 2 books, because there's a character perspective that gets introduced that's not quite as on the level of the other ones. But they're still 4.5 star reads. Still one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. We also have The Lies of Loch Lomora, which is just a top 10 fantasy book, or not even fantasy, just top 10 book in general. I absolutely love this first book. I love The Gentleman Bastards. And the plan was to reread the entire, well, not the entire series because it's not finished, but the first 3 books in the series this year. I didn't quite get to book 2 or 3, but that's fine. I'll get to them in 2022. But yeah, this book, still amazing, and it's been a while since I first read it. And I absolutely love the audiobook too, which Michael Page does the narration, and it's fantastic. Still one of my all-time favorite fantasy books, and just one of my favorite books in general. I also reread Kings of the Wild, which was very fun because I actually had another ulterior motive to read this book, because if you don't know, Kings of the Wild is fantastic, not only because of the characters and the story and the plot, but also Nicholas Eames throws in a lot of classic rock references. And I'm a huge classic rock fan, so basically I reread this book a little slowly, a little more slowly than I usually do, just so I could have my notebook out, and I literally wrote down every single classic rock reference I could find. I'm sure I missed some that are like even more obscure that I don't even know about, but I wrote down a lot of them, and I did a little bit of research as to kind of what music he was listening to while writing the book. And I've just got like a notebook full of classic rock references. So sometime next year, I don't know when I'll be able to get to it, I want to make a video that includes like every classic rock reference I could find in this book. And if you couldn't tell, it's one of my favorite books of all time. It might even be a new top 10 for me. I'd have to like look at my top 10 list and see what I have that I could discontinue. But yeah, I reread this book, and then I reread Bloody Rose, which was also great, but it was more like a 4-star book. It wasn't quite on the same level as Kings of the Wild, but yeah, Kings of the Wild, all-time favorite fantasy book. I also had early plans on rereading the entire Witcher series, and I did start it. I did reread The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, which are the first two books. They're short story collections. They start off the series before Blood of Elves is kind of like the main first book in the series. I reread these, and of course I loved them just as much the second time, if not more. And I was going to reread the entire series with a friend of mine, but we both got kind of busy, so that kind of got left by the wayside. But hopefully sometime in the future, maybe not next year, because I have a lot of books I want to read next year. Sometime in the near future, I want to reread the entire series. But yeah, first two short story collections, 5 stars. 5 stars, people. And then I only have a couple more fantasy books. Of course, Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire is my all-time favorite series. I just finished my reread for Game of Thrones this month. It was very impromptu. Like, I was in my Discord chat, in my Discord, and a few people were just like, hey, do we want to read Game of Thrones? And I was like, yeah. So I quickly just read this in like a few days, because at this point I've read it like 3 or 4 times, so I can just put the audiobook on really fast speed and just get lost in the world and the characters. But yeah, 5 stars. And I think the last fantasy book that I have here, and funny enough, it's probably one of the only books that I reread this year that I'm not going to give 5 stars. And that would be Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. Now, again, this is a reread. I read this years and years ago. And when I first read it, I gave it 4 stars. And I was interested to see if my rating would go up upon a reread, because I do now plan on finishing Malazan in 2022. Might be a lofty goal, but I'm going to try it. And I was hoping I would like it a bit more. Maybe it wouldn't be like a 5-star book, but maybe like a 4.5-star book. It's still a 4-star book. Like, it's a solid book. And I know a lot of people say it's the worst in the series, but I think it's a good book. My problem was, years ago, after I read this, I jumped into Dead House Gates just thinking it was going to be a sequel. And you get a whole new cast of characters, new continent, the whole works. So, and I didn't like it as much. I gave it like 3 stars. But I'm hoping, now that I know a little bit more about the series, that I'm going to like Dead House Gates even more. But yeah, Gardens of the Moon, still a solid reread. 4 stars, though. 4 stars. All right, now I'm getting lazy. I'm going to sit down. Oh, man. That feels good. So now I'm going to talk about some horror books that I reread. And one of my all-time favorite series by Dan Wells is the John Cleaver series. And this is a 6-book series split off into 2 trilogies. I reread the first trilogy of the John Cleaver series. And let's see if I can get that in frame. Here we go. So the first book is I Am Not a Serial Killer. Now, interestingly enough, the first time I read this book, I think I only gave it 4 stars. But upon a reread, I actually gave it 5 stars. And that's probably just, I'm more familiar with the series and the character, and I just really love the series. So 5 stars. And then these 2 books, Mr. Monster and I Don't Want to Kill You, book 2 and book 3 of the John Cleaver series. The first time I read them, I gave them 5 stars. And the second time I read them, I gave them 5 stars. And yeah, it's John Cleaver is just really awesome. I do think, however, my main love for the series is the audiobook, which is narrated by my favorite audiobook narrator, Kirby Hayborn. And I love Kirby Hayborn, and he does John Cleaver's voice just so well in this series. This is honestly one of my favorite trilogies of all time, even though it's a 6-book series split off into 2 trilogies. Like, this trilogy is very good. And then some more horror books by one of my new favorite authors, Zoe Stage. I love Zoe Stage, and I'm so glad that I've gotten a few people in my Discord to read her books because they're awesome. And yeah, Baby Teeth and Wonderland, both 5-star books. And I think I reread this before her new book came out. So I think that was in August. But yeah, this is one of my favorite horror books of all time. I reread this in October just because spooky season. That was my cat sneezing, by the way. And yeah, just I love Zoe Stage, and she's an auto-buy author for me. I will read anything she puts out. Her new book wasn't quite perfect. I gave it 4.5 stars, Getaway, but it was still very good. But these books, I anticipate rereading these books every October just because they're very good horror novels, and I love them. Some more spooky books that I reread. The Grip of It by Jenk. Now, this book gets 5 stars for me, not because it's like the best told story necessarily, but it's one of the rare books that actually managed to creep me out. I remember the first time I read this. It's a very short book, so I read it in one sitting. I was alone, like in a very rural house, and I finished this book at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was just like dead silent. And when I finished it, I was pretty creeped out. And it's rare that a book can manage to make me like scared. Maybe not scared, but like I said, creeped out. And so I reread this book. It wasn't quite as good the second time, but it was still really good. I really like the characters, and yeah, it's still very good. So 5 stars. The October Country by Ray Bradbury, one of my all-time favorite authors because of his short stories. And this is definitely one of the better Ray Bradbury short stories. Now, is every single short story in here perfect? No, but most of them are very, very, very good. And I had a blast reading these, and I know Pete from the Ponderings of Pete, he really enjoyed this too. I think I liked it a little better than him, but still, fantastic short story collection and 5 stars. And these are 2 children's books by the same authors that I read in middle school that I've reread this year that I absolutely love. And Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie, if you've seen my videos, you've probably heard me talk about this book. I've reread this book the most in my life, and this is the one book that I don't mind rereading just because it's so short and it's very sentimental to me. So yeah, I reread this book and loved it again. I think this is like the 6th or 7th time I've read it, and it's amazing. And by the same author, Notes from the Midnight Driver. This book, I actually don't think I've read this book since middle school, and I had forgotten a lot about it. So I was anticipating not loving it as much as I did back then, just because, it's a middle grade book, and the writing style, is, childish, but it was very good, and I loved it. It was, again, 5 stars. And actually, I had sort of forgotten that the main character from this book is actually in this book. I kind of known that, like, he makes a cameo, but, like, he's not a main character, but he's a pretty substantial part of this book, and I just kind of forgotten about it. But yeah, the story in here is actually very good. And the other thing about these 2 books is that for a middle grade books, they're pretty hard hitting. Like this book, the main character's brother is struggling with leukemia, which to have that in a middle grade book is something else. And in this book, the main character, like at the very beginning of the book, it's called Notes from the Midnight Driver, and he is like 16 and he like steals a bunch of his parents' booze and like steals their car and like gets in a wreck. It's just like, I'm just like, how is this a middle grade book? And then it's him having to deal with the consequences, and like he has to go through like part-time charity work. He has to like go to a hospital and hang out with elderly people, and like he befriends this elderly patient, and it's like a whole, you know, coming of age tale, just kind of like this one. But yeah, I just loved it so much, and I really need to try to read more of his books. I know, and I'm kind of rambling here, but see, this book is about drums. The main character loves drums. I had completely forgotten that the main character in this one loves to play guitar. That's a huge part of this book. And you probably couldn't tell because it's got a damn lawn gnome. You're like, what the hell is this? But yeah, the main character loves to play guitar, and it's just so good. Like, I'm probably gonna reread both of these books from now on every year. This has always been a tradition for me, but this one I'll probably read it right after it. Oh yeah, and for the horror, I completely forgot George R. R. Martin, Meat House Man, which this is originally a short story by him. A very good, very gruesome, very messed up story. And I would show you pictures, but a lot of them, I would probably have to ban. This video would get banned, so I won't do that. But it's very, very good, and I think it works really well as a comic book. And yeah, and shocker, 5 stars. 5 stars! And actually, right now, the very last thing I'm going to be rereading this year to kind of close out 2021 is some selected short stories and novellas from Dream Songs by George R. R. Martin. And this is kind of a bind-up of a lot of his famous and most well-regarded sci-fi, fantasy, horror short stories and novellas from the 70s and 80s. And I've already, let's see if I can get a table of contents here. Oh, there's my stamp of approval. And let's see if I can get a table of contents here. I've been reading a lot of them this morning and the last few days. I've already read all of these, and The Second Kind of Loneliness is probably my all-time favorite short story from any author. I absolutely love it. And A Song for Leia is one of my all-time favorite novellas. And there's a reason why George R. R. Martin is my favorite author, not only because of A Song of Ice and Fire, but from his earlier works too. So I'm glad I'm going to be closing out the year with some fantastic stories. All right, so those are all of the books that I managed to reread this year. And I don't know if I'm going to be doing a lot of rereading in 2022, but you know, like I said, this year my biggest surprise this year was the sheer amount that I've reread. Like, this is a substantial amount of books to reread when I already have so many books that I want to read in the first place. So we'll see if the streak continues next year. I mean, obviously there's books I want to reread like every year. Like Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie is going to be a staple. Probably these two, like during October, are going to be staples. I mean, oh yeah, I forgot to mention Stephen King. Crap! So if you didn't know already, on the Bookish Drummer Discord, my Discord, we're doing a read-along where we're reading all of Stephen King's short stories, beginning with Night Shift. And obviously, since I've read pretty much everything Stephen King has written, this is a reread for me. And we're about halfway through now, and in January and February, we're going to be finishing off Night Shift. So, yeah, if you're interested in joining the Bookish Drummer Discord, come join us, and it's not too late to start Night Shift. Since it's short stories, you can kind of just pick up wherever you want to. You can kind of read whatever you want to, pick and choose. We're having a great time. A lot of people are enjoying reading his short stories, so come on in. Come on in and try some Stephen King. That's so stupid. And then I've been rereading a lot of Stephen King novellas as well. I think I've read or reread probably like a dozen, maybe even like 15 of his novellas. And I'm just holding this as a placeholder. So I have, this is one of his novella collections. I have read all of the novellas in here. I haven't necessarily finished all of the rest of his novella collections. But yeah, I've been slowly making my way through his novella collections. And now I think I've hit everything. Am I missing anything? All right, we're good. Well, I've sufficiently lost my train of thought, so I think it's just best to end the video here. Yep, these are all of the books that I've reread. Please let me know if you've read any of these books yourself and what you thought of them, whether you loved them or you hate them or you thought they were meh. Please let me know down below. And if you're interested in reading any of these books and if you're interested in checking them out, please let me know down in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Fuck, how do I end my videos? Shit. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. How do I end my, what's my outro? Oh my God, I'm losing my mind here. You know what? Just do whatever you want. Like and subscribe. Thank you.